Hello everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of Mission MCU Podcast, where we discuss everything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am your host, Ryan Simmers, and joining me as my co-host, Ashley Strunk. Hello, Ashley.
Hello.
I do want to mention that we do have a team member that is not able to attend the recording today, so I will be speaking on his behalf later on in the episode. But we wanted to create this initial episode in order to not only introduce ourselves to you, but then also kind of dive into our MCU prior knowledge and experience, as well as what you can expect from the podcast as a whole and the direction that we decide to go in future episodes. As far as MCU background goes, I can go ahead and kick it off. And I have been a fan of the MCU, I'd say, since the original Iron Man released back in 2008. As Marvel films were being released, I had seen things here and there. I enjoyed what I did watch, but it wasn't until about Captain America Civil War had come out where my negligence to keep up on the storyline and watch all of the films in sequence really showed. And I remember going to the theater with my father and sitting down, and there were tons of characters that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know who Scarlet Witch was, Wanda Maximoff, or Vision. And these characters already had their storylines and character background developed, and I was at a total loss. I remember leaving that theater with more questions than I had coming into the movie. So it was kind of at that point where I took a step back and was like, you know what, if I want to dedicate myself to something like this, learning the story, I need to sit down and watch all of these instead of coming in with only bits and pieces. Because I remember when it came to Avengers Endgame was in theaters, and my uncle and dad had invited me to go with them, I absolutely declined because I had seen the amount of promotion that was going into that film and how massive it was going to be. And I stopped myself because I'm like, I'm not letting that experience be ruined because of something that was going to be so grand and the scale that it was being portrayed. I did not want to ruin it, and I didn't go on my journey to watch all these films until actually after Avengers Endgame and even Spider-Man Far From Home had released, and it was at that point where I started with Captain America, the First Avenger, and went in chronological order through all the films up until Endgame and then Spider-Man Far From Home. And I will admit, I did not even get through halfway through of phase one. I might have got to, I definitely didn't even get to the first Avengers film where I fell in love with it because the way that it's portrayed in chronological order, that it did so much on character development and plot progression that it became a part of my life. It is now ingrained in my bloodstream, and I am a major fan. I go to the premieres of every film. I watch every episode if I can the night or the day that it releases. I mean, it is ingrained in my lifestyle at this point. I will take a moment to speak upon Matt's behalf. Matt is very much like me, where he is a huge fan. He will go to the premiere of the films as well. If you can't catch it the night that it's released, he will go the opening weekend whenever possible. He's on top of the TV shows. We currently discuss like new trailers that come out and everything. So, I mean, Matt is very much like me. In addition to the knowledge that I have of the MCU, Matt does have some prior comic book knowledge about a lot of the characters where I do not, and I will throw a disclaimer in there because I choose not to read the comics, not just because I don't think I will like them, but I have heard cases, I don't want anything ruined for me. I love the surprise of the MCU, and I only take the information from that regarding these characters, these storylines. I don't want to fall into a concept where I understand and learn from these characters from the comic books and then have some kind of expectation going into how they should be portrayed in the films, and then I have a conflict between which one is better and things like that. Maybe down the road, I've pondered it that could be a point to bring upon the podcast later down the road, that I could read some comic books and then compare it to the MCU to keep it MCU related. But I mean, that's something that could be talked about and discussed later on down the road. But without further ado, I will hand the mic off to Ashley, and she can go ahead and tell you guys about her MCU knowledge and experience. Go ahead, Ashley.
I actually have zero knowledge. I have probably watched bits and pieces of maybe 3 movies in the past. So just coming in from like an outsider perspective that's never watched any of the movies and kind of explaining where my takes are.
So you heard it here, folks. Ashley has near to zero knowledge of the MCU whatsoever.
Yes,
so,
never watched a full movie.
So some of you might be asking, if not all of you, might be having a weird expression on your face right now or kind of raising questions like, well, how in the world is this going to work? So Ashley and I have come together, and the dynamic we want to bring on this podcast is from both ends of the spectrum. So I have been a huge fan of Marvel since I've taken upon this journey to watch all the films. It's ingrained in my blood, like I said. Ashley is the exact opposite. She knows, I'd say, 0% of MCU. So I feel we can use that dynamic because I would love, Ashley's a perfect candidate that I would love to hear that first take, that first impression, thoughts and feelings on these films, because I feel when I go back and watch these, I can't have that. I'm very biased because I know what's going to happen. So I don't have that, like, I have the emotional connection, but I don't have that like fresh experience type feeling because I know what's coming, right? So when I go watching these films over and over, I kind of look at the minute details and see what these, like the dialogue or the underlying plot points or some symbolism to most of the things that are being portrayed in these movies now, that I can't just sit and look at the overarching like magnificence that's happening in each of these films. Where Ashley, when she goes and sees these, she's bringing that to the table. So I love to hear that. And then whatever she brings into the podcast as far as her first impressions, I fill in those gaps for you guys as far as some of the background implements that are going on in these films and how they progress through this entire storyline. So having said that, Ashley and I are going to do a segment that is like a first watch / rewatch series. So this will be her first time watching every single piece of media that is in the MCU. And for me, it's going to be my third time around in the first 3 phases of the MCU, watching the what's called the Infinity Saga, which Ashley, you will hear more that term thrown around a lot
so
more.
Naive.
But that'll be my third time going through the Infinity Saga, and then once we get to phase 4, I have watched all that, and that'll be my second time going. So I am actually very interested to do this series with you, Ashley, because then I can take a step back and look at the minute details of phase 4 when we get to that, because I feel there's a lot that I don't know about when it comes to that. So I'm very excited to move forward with this.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
Good. I know this is quite the journey, so I hope you are. And I hope you all are ready. If you want to go through this journey with us as well, you very well may. We will establish some social media platforms, so I will make it a priority to go ahead and post the chronological timeline that we will be following on all of our pages, and I will list the handles at the end of the episode so you can access that, as well as our email. But having said that, where Matt comes into the equation is me and Matt kind of took a look at me and Ashley's plan, and we kind of said, well, an obstacle we might face is as we're going through this journey, there's going to be current MCU projects that are going to be released, especially in 2023. I think there's 3 movies and 4 or 5 TV shows, something along those lines. So it's like, we're obviously not going to be able to cover that on the segment, me and Ashley. If Ashley and I did anything in that regard, things would be ruined for her.
Right.
So Matt is going to join me, and we're going to do our own separate segment where we talk about new projects. And before every episode, I am going to put a spoiler warning on there. So it's like if you stumble across our episode and you're following the journey that me and Ashley are taking, and you don't want things ruined, I will give you time to kind of turn off the episode, kind of recollect, do whatever you need to do. But I don't want anything ruined for you, because if you are going on this journey, I'm very excited for you, and I hope it has the same impact as me and Ashley are experiencing as we go through as well. As far as when we break down these movies and TV shows, what I'm going to try to do my best with is I will foreshadow some things, but I will not do it to the point where I spoil any of the further movies, because if you're going on this journey, then it ruins the impact. I do not want to spoil anything. There's going to be a few things that we might have to kind of work around, but it's not within our scope to do that whatsoever. One additional thing I do want to note is we will be covering the first 3 phases, which are entirely made up of films. When we get to phase 4, it does include Disney Plus TV shows as well as movies. What we will not be covering are the Netflix TV shows, because at least it hasn't come out yet that those TV shows have had a direct impact on the MCU films and all forms of media there. So we will not be covering those. If there is a time while we're doing these episodes that Kevin Feige and the head of the Marvel comes out and says that those are canon directly, and events that happen in those TV shows directly impact what you need to know in the rest of the films, then we can cover those accordingly. But we will be venturing out into the Sony universe as well, involving the Venom films and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man films, because I think they're very pivotal at points in time within the MCU timeline, but we will get to that later. So that concludes our first episode of Mission MCU. We hope you enjoyed learning about the team and the upcoming content for our podcast. If you have any questions or would like to reach out, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching Mission MCU Podcast. You can also email us at missionmcu@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on our latest episodes. Be sure to tune in next week when we break down the first movie in our timeline, Captain America: The First Avenger. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on Mission MCU.